All right, here we are. Another front wheel drive, a 2016 GMC Acadia. So we do these, all these years of Acadias, they all have the same transmission, and we do quite a few of these. So, and this one's four-wheel drive, so it's got a little transfer case on it. This is a big deal here, so I'm trying to walk you through this. First thing we're gonna do is take this cover off, then take this air box off, and take this cover off, and then we'll be able to see a little bit more down in there. All right, so to get this air box off, it's this plug in, and then you see these right here, T25s, and then these clips, clip, there's a whole bunch of clips on this to take this off, and then things will open up. Now that that's out of the way, I used to take this part out too, this part of the box, and that is a super pain in the butt to get that out of there, as it's tight in there. With all these fuel lines and everything getting in the way, it's a big deal. So I just leave it there. There's no need to take it out. You can see the transmission cooler line right there, this shifter cable, another cooler line right here. There's a 10mm bolt that has to come off of a little bracket right there for one of the cooler lines. This thing comes off with a 10mm right here. And then we got bell housing bolts, like 3 of them to take off while we're up here. Okay, so now we can see in here pretty good. So this is gonna have to come off, and I just set it up out of the way. And then this heat shield is gonna have to come off, unplug this O2 sensor with 3 10s, and then that exhaust manifold has to come off to get the starter off, to get the torque converter bolts out. So when we get there, I'll show you that, but it just opened up in here now. We're gonna take this off, I'm gonna take the shifter cable off by taking this bolt and this bolt out and move it out of the way. And then we'll get the three top bell housing bolts. Next is going to be these cooler lines, one here and one back there. And what I'm going to do now is just take the nuts off and then leave them and not pull them off until I'm ready, so they don't leak. Now what we're going to do is take this out of the way, 2 10s, and so we can get down to this heat shield and take that off, and take the 3 15s off that hold that exhaust or that catalytic converter on to the manifold. So after that's out of the way, now you can see there's one right there, and there's a 10 right there, and there's one right there. So really that's like one right here, the one right there, and then one over there. Now you can see from the top. One, two, three, 15mm, and that will let that catalytic converter loose. So I spray them with a little bit of PB and then just take those off. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take those bell housing bolts out. 3 bell housing bolts, I'm pretty sure. Okay, one right there, and one right there under that pipe, and then one right there. Get those 3 out. Three. Now that you have those 3 out, before we go to the bottom, there's a bracket for this line right here. There's a bracket right around that corner, and that bracket has a 10mm nut holding it on. And that nut needs to come off to release that line, because that line comes up here and it's this cooler line. So we got to unhook that. Okay, so now I'm gonna have to hang this motor before I take anything apart on the bottom. And the reason is because there is no, all the motor mounts are on the bottom and the subframe holds the motor up in there. So there is one mount right here. You can hang it from that one. And then I'm gonna take out, this is the way I always do it. I take out this bolt right here, and there's an identical one on the other side right there. I take those two bolts out, and then I put my chain on there, and it comes up, you know, and kind of holds it right here where I can get the picker on it. All right, so you take your chain, put it right under this bolt, hold the chain, just like this. And now you got your chain to hang. I take a piece of wood, put it under here to protect the fender. Now we're going to take the weight. So now you can see this is hung. This has some good wood here protecting the fender on both sides. We got our chain in there hung. So now the next thing is to take it up and start taking apart everything on the bottom, take the whole subframe out. That's where we're headed now. Okay, so here we are up in the air. This is the subframe, this whole thing. It connects the bottom control arms. It comes all the way around here. The rack hooks to it with these bolts. Drive shaft's got to come out of the way. Exhaust has to come out. Heat shields have to come off. All control arms. This right here has to come off first. This exhaust has to come off here. Motor mounts here. Motor mounts over here. This whole piece right here. Motor mount bowl here. All of this stuff has to come out. All on the floor. You'll see when it all comes apart to be able to get this transfer case out first, and then the transmission comes out second, and all of this has to be out of the way to get that out of there. So first thing we're going to do, take this plate off the bottom right here. All right, so the next major thing we're going to do is get this exhaust out of here. So it's going to be these two, it's going to be those two, and it's going to be these two. All right, we're back with some heat. Comes right off with some heat, baby. All right, disconnect the O2 sensors. All right, so the next thing we're going to do here is take these 8s off and take this front part of this drive shaft off. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is take this heat shield off. There is another heat shield that's going to have to end up coming off, this one right here. And there's some 10 millimeters. You can see one right there that holds that on. And then rack bolts. So this bolt, they go all the way through with a nut on the other side, nut on the other side. And then on this side, it's just bolted down right here with some 18s. One here and one that goes in this way after you get this heat shield off. And then we're going to take these 10 millimeters off that hold this line. Alright, so this is the 10 that you could see earlier. The other one is right underneath this catalytic converter. Right here. Okay, so now you can see this 18 right here, and they go through here. So here's one here, and then one that comes down from the top. And then these two big bolts here. And that unhooks the rack from the subframe. Then we'll move on to the ball joints and the sway bar links. Before I take these two out, this is just a tip that I figured out. When you put this back together, this won't exactly, it can go in multiple spots. Like it can tighten over here, or it could tighten over here, or it could tighten, you know. So if that's in a different spot than it was, the steering wheel will be crooked. So this needs to go back exactly where it was. So what I do is I make a mark right here, and I make a mark right here. So this is the subframe, it goes back in the same spot. And then this, I make a mark between those two. So when it goes back together, I tighten it back down, those marks line back up. Okay, now you can see the marks that are going to line back up when I go back. Then the steering wheel will be straight. Okay, now the rack's loose. All right, so after that one, you got to take this one off here. So it's this 18 underneath here. So we're going to do this right here, 18 millimeter. And so this is, I think I've showed this in one of my other videos, but what you do first is take this axle nut off and make this axle where it'll move in, and then you can get a ratchet wrench on that 18, otherwise it's a pain. So right now I'm going to take these axle nuts off and see if I can get these axles to move. Alright, so once you can push that axle in like this, then you can get your wrench on it. Oh, not 18, 21. See, the wrench won't come off, but when you press this axle in, then you can get your wrench off. Otherwise, you got to do it one at a time. So usually this doesn't happen taking it out, but sometimes it does. Is when you turn this, the whole center stud turns with it. And so the nut doesn't loosen. So what you have to do is you have to put upward pressure on here to make it tighter in there to where you can get that nut off. All right, so now it's the sway bar lengths. Always take something on the other side. Pull. Okay, so we're pretty much down to it now. It's going to be taking the subframe out. So everything is pretty much loose. These are out now. Everything's loose from the subframe. Before I hit these with a hammer and break these loose, I'm going to drop this down a little bit. And everything's staying in, axles, everything's staying in. The subframe's coming out of the way. So it's these two and this one. Same thing on this side. And then in the front, you got one and those two on both sides. And before you loosen those, it'd be good to support it with something, otherwise it'll just fall on your head. And I wish I could show you, but the camera decided to go black. So transmission jack, a 4x4 on top of the transmission jack, and it lowers the subframe down. All right, so now that we got that subframe out of the way, everything is opened up. So now we're gonna take this axle out. I drained it so that it doesn't leak there. And then we're gonna take this 13, that one right there, and that one right there off. And then this whole bracket will come off. Oh, and you gotta take off, I don't know if you can see, it's hard to see, but right there is a 13. Right down here is a 13. There's 3 of them up in there. And you have to turn the axle so that the indent in the axle is where the bolt is. And there's 3 of them, 1, 2, 3 up in there that you have to take off. And then this bracket comes off. So now that is off of there, it opens up where you can just pop the axle right out on both sides. So now that the axles are out, the next thing we're going to do is take this power transfer unit off. So that is 3 15 millimeters here and 2 here, and then that'll pull off and we'll set that on the floor. You can see that's off the side. This is a transmission bell housing bolt. That's the last one I ever take out. And then these around here. Next thing is going to be this 15 millimeter right here, which is going to let this catalytic converter come off, which we already on the top took off the 315s that hold it on. So just this one now, and this will come down because we got to get to the starter, which is up in there, and then the torque converter bolts are behind it. So now that cat's out of the way, you can see that it opens up a lot in here. We'll get this starter unbolted and get it off. 1, 2 bolts for the starter. Get it out of the way. I might try to leave this and just move the starter up over here. So let's do that now. Let's get the starter bolts out. One part to getting the starter out sometimes too is this knock sensor right here. So you unplug it, sometimes you have to loosen the bolt and kind of turn it out of the way because the starter doesn't want to come back far enough because it's in the way. I ended up just taking the knock sensor out. It was easier to just take it all the way off. Set it out of the way, then the whole starter comes over here, sets on top of the mount, which is perfect. And then in here is where you get to your torque converter bolts. Bam. I think there's 3 of them in this, maybe 4. Turn the motor by the front crankshaft here. out. We're really close. I'm gonna take this mount off. Then I'm gonna take this bracket off. Then I'm gonna pop these cooler lines loose. One here, one on the front. I also have to unplug this plug-in right here, which is easy. This is that bracket I was telling you about from the top that has that 10mm nut on it that you gotta get off. So that cooler line will come off. Unplug little crap like this, and this whole thing, you can see it's swinging in there. The only thing holding it is that pick and that chain from the top. So let's get this mount off. Also, pay attention to the way this nub's on here. Now that's all unhooked off the side of there. I went on the top too, and I kind of lowered it down on this side, so the transmission's kind of hanging down where it should be, so I can get it out. Take this electrical connector off, and then I'm going to take these bolts off, and then I'm going to put the jack under the transmission. All right, now we're going to take the rest of these belt housing bolts out. Okay, last bolt's out. Here's another common problem when you're doing these, is when you finally do break this loose, the torque converter, it stays stuck in the flywheel. So you'll pull this out and it'll start leaking and the torque converter won't come out with it. So you got to kind of get something in there and pry that torque converter out of the flywheel. You go both sides at the same time. Get something here and something here. And just like that. And there she is. So this is what gets stuck in the back of the crankshaft. And not bad, just gets stuck in there a little bit. The whole thing is hanging from that chain up there, the motor, and it's out. All right, another step-by-step front wheel drive. All right, everybody, thanks for watching, and we will see you on the next one.